My name's Samuel Mbugua. I'm a lecturer of human nutrition at Egerton University main campus, and I also happen to be a recipient of kidney transplant, and I'm the third born in our family, and my sister here is the fourth born, so she's my follower, and she happens to have been my donor. She's the one who gave me one of her kidneys after mine failed. And I'm happy to share the story of my journey as a kidney patient, from my experiences during dialysis, transplant, and now my life post-transplant.
I'm Peris Wanja Kidney, and I am ECD teacher at Kasambara Primary School. I'm also a farmer. I'm a donor to my brother, Samuel Mbugua.
Okay, so my kidney illness story is an interesting one, because it so happens that my diagnosis was done around mid-February of 2019, and before that I had no idea that I had any form of a kidney illness. So what I did was, one day I woke up, and that is after a weekend where, after meeting several friends, everyone seemed to be concerned that I was losing weight. But on my side, I happened to have been on a weight loss personal program, and so I was comfortable and okay that I'm losing weight, and so I'm attaining my goal of having a lower weight that I consider healthy. But then when I realized everyone is concerned that I seemed not to be okay because I've lost a lot of weight, and it so happens that around that time I had also gone for 2 weeks with a persistent dry cough. And my concern basically was even if it's allergy, then by the first week it should have subsided, but mine persisted on up to the second week. And so I sought help at the health center within the university, that is the medical department at Egerton University in Njoro. And on a Monday morning, I told my wife to drive me over, and I had a lecture that morning. So I actually even wrote my students a message on WhatsApp and told them I'm at the sanatorium, and once I'm through with seeing the clinician, I'll come back, we continue with our lecture for that day. So I went in, and the clinician examined me, and the clinician was of the view there is no water retention in my lungs, and so she doesn't see any clinical issues with me. But since she could hear the cough that kept coming, persisting for a while before subsiding, so she wrote for me a referral letter to go and see a chest expert. And in between waiting for the letter to be signed by our chief medical officer, I was then referred back to the nursing triage section for them to have my vitals, which is basically blood pressure, to be taken, which is a requirement. So as I went to the nursing station, we did 4 attempts, and every attempt at measuring my blood pressure was reading error. And at that point, everyone got concerned. They even called in a patient who was on the line, and the machine was able to take their pressure. So it became puzzling, and that's when we went back to the clinician. The clinician attempted, but the reading was still coming to error. So at that point, the clinician requested they go to the medical store and get the old sphygmomanometer machines, the ones that you pump. So when that one was brought, she was able to wrap it around my left arm, and after taking the measurements, I saw the clinician looked a bit disturbed, and at that point she told me my blood pressure was very high. It was 230/173, which is considered a medical emergency. And at that point, then it became such that I had to be admitted for clinical management, and that is how then my journey in terms of maybe becoming a patient, because I had never been hospitalized before in my life. And so at the age of 46, then I find myself in hospital at War Memorial Hospital, Nakuru, and my physician, Dr. Obure, was able to manage me from day one, and within 3 days, he had managed to stabilize my blood pressure to within the normal levels. But then he had a concern that having had blood pressure is 230/173, and I had no presentations of headache or any other complaint, which is common when your blood pressure reaches certain levels. So he felt maybe the hypertension had been persistent for quite a long time, and I seem to have developed tolerance, and that is why I could not even feel the headache that is common at such levels. And so he ordered for a battery of tests. We did x-rays, we did a lot of blood works, and when the results started coming in, everything else seemed to be okay, apart from electrolyte tests, which indicated I had very high levels of blood urea, which was at around 30, and my creatinine levels were at around 800, which is quite high. And from those two readings, it became almost clear that the kidneys have been affected, and I needed then to proceed on for further tests. So we did a CT scan through a radiology lab, and through the CT scan, we were able to show that one of my kidneys had fused completely. In other words, it had lost total function, while the second kidney had fused to an extent where almost like only 5% of the kidney tissue seemed to be the remaining functional part within the CT scan charts. And that is how then the radiologist and the clinician both were in agreement that I was now an end-stage kidney disease. And considering most kidney patients who are diagnosed earlier, they usually progress from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 before reaching stage 4, which is the end-stage kidney disease. So here I am, I'm coming in, and my first diagnosis at my first admission at the age of 46 is end-stage kidney disease. So it was puzzling and disturbing to me. But of course, I could tell it could most probably be due to the very high pressure, hypertension, which seems to have been there for a while. So I now, after the physician had managed my hypertension and brought the blood pressure levels to within normal, I was then referred to a nephrologist. And so I traveled to Nairobi through contacts from my colleagues, and I was referred to the late Professor J.O. Were, and Professor Ajo Were, Anthony Were, then became my nephrologist, and I was able to see him on a couple of sessions. And within that first visitation, after he reviewed my file and the test that had been done, he recommended I commence dialysis. And since I had no other presenting complaints, I was stable, hemodynamically stable at that time, then I was told you are better off then undertaking dialysis within your home area, which is Nakuru. And at that point then, from his referral letter, I came, and using my NHIF registration card and my hospital university healthcare scheme cover, then I was able to get into a memorial, and that is how I commenced my dialysis around March of 2019. So I was dialyzing on Tuesdays and Fridays of every week. And after a month and a half or so, Professor Were ordered for some tests, and basically what he wanted to verify was whether mine was a reversible situation or not, or it was chronic, meaning then it's something I'll have to live with and it's not reversible. And after the test, then he was of the opinion that after dialysis, within a day or two, my creatinine levels start rising again, which showed dialysis is assisting me in terms of clearing the nitrogenous waste from the body, but after a couple of days, the build-up again starts showing up in the body. So he advised me at my age, the options are to continue with dialysis for life or take the option of a kidney transplant. And from his advice then, we reviewed the options available for me in terms of likely places where I could undertake a successful transplant. And after consultation also with my employer's side, then I was able to arrive at choosing to undertake my transplant within the St. Luke's Orthopedic and Trauma Hospital in Eldoret through the hands of Dr. Matthew Koech, who is the nephrologist at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, and also a private practitioner at Oaktree Kidney and Chronic Illnesses Center within Eldoret town. So through Professor Were's recommendation and referral, then I proceeded on to Eldoret, and I met Dr. Matthew Koech. And after examinations and reviews, then he gave me the starting steps towards undertaking transplant. And the first initial steps are basically to identify a living relative who happens to share the same blood type with you. And from there, then they commence with other tests like serology tests, where then they confirm the donor is clean and out of any possibilities of transmitting any maybe viral infections or other infections to the recipient, who in that case was going to be myself. So we did a couple of tests, close to 30 tests, and among the most critical ones was then Peris was happened to be sharing the same blood type with me. And after we did what we call the HLA, that is the histocompatibility test, to confirm that we not only come from the same bloodline, but there is compatibility at molecular level, which then reduces the risk of rejection once transplant is done. Then we did the other series of tests that are recommended, and in the end then it was confirmed medically by Dr. Matthew Koech and the nephrology surgeon who is from India, Dr. Vijaya, that Peris is a good match to and qualifies to be my donor. And so through that then we went through counseling, because one of the challenges in kidney failure, especially when you are progressing into transplant, is the psychosocial issues, the stigma associated sometimes with being a donor, because some people believe when you donate one of your kidneys, then your lifespan or lifestyle is impacted on negatively. You might not live as long, which is not correct. It's misinformation. And so counseling is done to make sure the donor understands that, and also the family members understand you are not sacrificing one person for the other. And so we went through that, and through my interactions with other potential recipients who were fellow kidney failure disease patients. Others, of course, were not lucky, because in some of them, like, the relatives would tend to shy off and literally like walk away from them because no one wants to give out a kidney. Others, up to the last days, when you find the donor disappearing. And so it's quite a journey for people, and much of the stigma and challenges are driven largely by misconceptions and misunderstanding by the general population. And so from our counseling then, Peris understood it all, and that is how our journey then took that turn of her being my donor. So how it came about is when Professor Were told me it has to be a relative, and if you have siblings, it's even much better. And at that point then I called home and informed my parents. And of course, all my siblings are grown-ups, they are adults, and so we also talked with all of them. So I told them, I've been told I need a donor from amongst my siblings, since you all qualify in terms of the age. You're above 18 and none is past the 50s. And what we need is each of you will go and do a serology test for screening against hepatitis, HIV, and then after serology tests, if they come out negative, then the next test is blood group. So I'd already done my blood typing and I knew I'm O positive. And so all my siblings were very excited about it, and everyone looked forward to assisting me. And so it became like a challenge. We don't know who will choose in case they all turn to be of the same blood type like me and qualify in terms of the any illness screening that will be done. And that is how then, unfortunately, when the blood typing was done, then it was found, I think it was only Peris who shared the same blood group with me. And so it became now upon her to say if she still feels she feels comfortable enough and she's confident to go through the process.
Wakati tulipata hiyo habari kuwa anahitaji dona, nilijaribu kuuliza my sister ambaye yuko MP SHA kuhusu nikitolewa kidney itaendaje. Sasa naye pia alitueleza hakuna shida, mtu anaweza ishi na kidney moja. Sasa wakati huo nikaambia my husband ningependa kumsaidia brother yangu. Akaniambia hakuna shida. Na brother yangu mwingine alikuwa amesema yeye anaweza jitolea ampe kidney. Sasa yeye wakati alipopimwa ikaonekana blood group yake imekataa. Ndiposa nikaenda kupimwa. Wakati tulifanana blood group nikajitolea. Nikasema nimejitolea Jioni nikampigia simu nikamwambia mimi niko tayari. Ukiniambia tuanze ni kuanza tu safari. Akaniambia na ngoja ripoti kutoka kwa daktari. Wakati alipoambiwa sasa tuanze, akani-inform. Kwa hivyo sasa tukaanza test. Test zote tukienda zilikuwa zinakuwa sawa. Nami nilikuwa naomba Mungu ili zote ziwe positive, ili niweze nikamsaidia. Nilikuwa tu nasikia tu kumsaidia. Tukaenda kwa testi zote zikawa sawa. Ikafika wakati wa transplant itafanywa, tukaenda Eldoret na tukafanyiwa.
My case, right from diagnosis of end-stage kidney disease, by the 4th day, it affected me psychologically, considering I'm trained as a nutrition and dietetics professional, and so I'm within the field of healthcare, so I understood and knew what the implication is. And after the diagnosis, and of course now this journey of trying to look for a donor amongst my siblings, my firstborn sister had even gone ahead and identified a lady within their neighborhood who had been a donor to the brother, and she was very happy and excited to come and talk to me. So she came during one of the social support setups that I had from many friends. We had even a church Catholic mass here at home, and it was during one of those sessions that I met this lady. They had, I think she came in the next trip where they had come as a Jumuiya group from their neighborhood, and she told me a lot about being a donor and what the journey was, the challenges she went through, and looking at her, she looked very okay, and that was like 4 years down the line since she donated a kidney to her brother. And of course, I was able to use social media and things like the internet. I went into Google, I went into YouTube, and really did a lot of research and found donors actually lead a normal life after giving out a kidney. So usually the cause of death would be other life-related issues. It's not that it shortens their lifespan in any way. So having gone through that and having that awareness, then my next concern was, because, okay, through reading even books, you find there are people who actually lack a donor because no one is willing and they feel it's a bigger risk. So for me, my fear was, will anyone amongst my siblings feel fearful to give me one of their kidneys? And I would not wish to force anyone into it. So when Peris called me and told me she's willing, I think the first thing I did, I cried alone. And because it was so touching and moving to me, knowing she's willing to put, you say put your life on the line, because the idea of going into theater for a major surgical procedure is not something you can say it's just a walk into the hospital and out. So realizing she's willing to sacrifice a part of her life for me was really moving and touching. And since that time, I think we've had this close connection, because I feel I have a part of her body in me, the kidney. And that is why even after my transplant, most donors will go home and the recipient will be left to recover and be on the clinics. But she agreed even to stay with me for the 2 months that I was in residence within Eldoret. Of course, her kids are mature. Her firstborn is now in the university. The secondborn is doing his 4th form, I think, this year. And the lastborn is in upper primary within boarding school. So she had no family issues, and the husband, Charles, was very supportive, and he supported her to be away from home, and he was left to take care of the homestead. So there was this support that you felt coming in many ways, and the whole idea of they are doing it for you as an individual is really touching and moving.
Wakati tulimaliza testi zote, tulielekea Eldoret about 2 weeks mbele, ili aweze kumaliziwa hizo test zingine zenye zilikuwa zimebaki. Na wakati tulimaliza that ikafika August 2019, ndio ilikuwa siku ya theater, na asubuhi tulikuwa tumeambiwa tutaingia saa 2. Na niligoja nikaona saa 2 imepita, saa 3 ndio my brother akaniandikia message, akaniambia potassium imepatikana ikiwa juu kidogo, ataenda dialysis kwanza. Kwa hivyo nilisubiri tu hadi akarudi. Saa 8 ndio tuliingia theater, nikaingia mbele yake, ndio naye akarudi akafika. Alinikuta na tuliongea tu kidogo hapo, naye daktari akakuja akaniambia, alikuwa anaitwa Dr. Sonu, akaniambia yeye ndio atanifanya operation. Nikamuuliza itaenda for how long? Akaniambia yangu itakuwa for 4 hours. Kwa hivyo naye my brother ndio Dr. Viji alikuja naye wakaongea na yeye, akamwambia yake ni ya 6 hours. Kwa hivyo tulipokaa kidogo ikafika saa 8 kamili, sasa nikaingia mbele. Wakati niliingia huko nikaambiwa nilalie kitanda ilikuwa hapo. Wakaanza kunipima pressure, wakiconnect kwa mashini. Nikauliza kwa hivyo hapa ndio nafanywa theater na pasuliwa? Akasema ndio. Wakaniweka kila kitu, kisha wakauliza daktari kama ako tayari. Kisha wakaniweka dawa ya kulala. Wakati waliniweka hata sikumaliza, hata haikuisha kuwekwa. Juu waliniambia sasa tunakuweka ndio ulale. Nikamwambia hata siwezi lala. Lakini dakika chache niliona kama ni stars zimejaa na si kujijua tena. Kwa hivyo sasa kisha nilirudi kuamka usiku. Sasa ndio niliweza kujijua. Wakati nilitolewa kwa theater, my sister in law na my sister walikuwa hapo nje. Walijaribu kuniita, lakini nilikuwa najaribu kuongea, sikuwa naweza kufungua macho. Lakini ilifika wakati nikafungua tu mara moja, nikaona wamefurahi, kisha nikafunga. Nikapelekwa kwa ward. Nilikaa huko siku 3, ya 3 ndio nilienda nyumbani. Nilikuwa tu napewa painkillers. Na baada siku 3 nilikuwa okay. Wiki 2 kila kitu ilikuwa sawa, nikarudi clinic na nikaambiwa niko sawa, nikatolewa bandage nilikuwa nimewekwa kwa wound. Na nikaendelea tu na maisha kama kawaida. Kwa hivyo kutoka hapo sijapata shida yoyote hadi sasa. Naendelea tu. Hakuna kazi yenye siwezi nikafanya. Kwa hivyo namshukuru Mwenyezi Mungu kwa yote hayo.
Of course, when you're diagnosed with kidney failure, I think one of the biggest challenges is diet restrictions. So there are foods you can't eat, especially like foods that are high in potassium, because if your potassium levels go high, then it even could lead to a quick silent death. So there are all these restrictions. There are fruits I couldn't take. Vegetables have to be boiled and the water discarded before they are cooked, so that then you're sure the potassium levels are low. And things like meat, then it's only white meat occasionally. And so having gone through those several months of the restrictions, and here I was on 30th of August ready for my transplant, then we were admitted at St. Luke's Hospital in Eldoret on 29th, and they had to do then final blood sample drawing for tests to be done for the transplant to be done the following day, which was on 30th of August. And when we woke up on 30th of August, I don't know if it's due to anxiety or maybe the food I ate that evening. For the first time, my blood potassium levels were slightly up. And of course, the surgeon and the physician, that is Dr. Viji and Dr. Matthew Koech, were concerned. And so they suggested I go for 2 hours of dialysis at Oak Tree Center. And usually a regular dialysis takes 4 hours, but this one had to take 2 hours. And within 2 hours, they felt the potassium levels were down. So a blood sample was drawn, and the analysis showed my potassium levels were now within acceptable range. So I walked in, and I briefly met my sister, and we talked, and she was upbeat and upright. And after talking to the surgeon, then she moved, because there are 2 separate theaters. So when she moved into hers, then for me, I'm waiting there, because for the recipient, they wait a bit before they take you in. So Dr. Vijay, who is the vascular surgeon from India, and she's the one who was to do the transplant for me. So she came, of course, we talked a bit. She gave me the Bible to read and gave me Psalms 91, which is a popular verse to encourage you and feel there is hope, and with God everything is possible. So I kept reading the verse there and rereading it. And once I was ready, then I was moved into theater. And here I am, and it's my first time ever to enter into theater. So I'm on the theater bed and talking to the nurses and the anesthetist as we are waiting for the doctor to give the go-ahead. So when the doctor gave the go-ahead, already I had my catheter line, which is the line that the pump card that I was using for dialysis. So they just hooked up the anesthesia line, and so just as they were telling me, we are now putting you to sleep, then I just saw lots of stars and I was out. So then the procedure was done. They were able to get her kidney out, and it was brought over and inserted into my body. So by the time I came back into consciousness was at the waiting area outside of the theater, and the first thing I felt was a full bladder. And having been on dialysis for like around 4 months, at some point I was no longer having the urge, or even whenever I go for a short call, there would be a few drops only of urine coming out. So here I am 4 months later, even the bladder has lost touch of the sensation of a full bladder, and I wake up and I feel my bladder is full. So I told the clinician I was with, like, my bladder is full, I need to go for a short call. Of course, I'm still mixed up out of the anesthesia, and they told me, you already have a catheter, so don't withhold urine, just let it, release it, it will come out through the urinary catheter. And that is how then they asked me in case I'm feeling okay. I told them, yeah, but I'm feeling some pain coming and going, but they told me that is normal. So I was taken into my special room within the ward, which is an isolated room, fumigated and sterile. And that is how then my healing process started. And the feeling was just wonderful, feeling I can be able to go for a short call again, and knowing now the new kidney is working. Because one of the biggest fears of transplant is hyperacute rejection, which happens immediately the kidney is plugged into your body. So you find for some people, when they wake up, they realize it was plugged, but it was knocked out by immunity. But mine was okay because the tests that they did were good enough to pick for me a matching donor. And so from there, I think my excitement was, we are alive. I inquired about my sister and I was told, she's very okay. She came out quite okay and she's in her room, and she should be out of this place within the next 2 days. So for me, I think from there, of course, I had cracked a few jokes with Dr. Matthew Koech, who is my physician nephrologist, and Dr. Vijay also. And from there, then I felt very confident knowing that the first step has been successful. So from there now, it was on to the post-transplant life.
Wakati nilitoka theater, tukaenda nyumbani kwenye tulikuwa tunaishi hostel. Kuna wageni walisema watakuja kuniona kwa sababu hawaamini. Na my sister, our firstborn, aliwaleta. Na walipofika hawakuwa naamini, lakini walifurahia sana. Hadi waniletea keki, wakasema hiyo ni mimi wameniletea, na zawadi zingine waliniletea. Kwa hivyo kutoka hapo tuliishi kule miezi miwili, tukarudi tukakuja nyumbani. Huku nilikuta watu sana wamenigojea ili wahakikishe kama ni ukweli ama kuliendaje. Juu wengi hawakuwa wanaamini, hawakuwa wanaona kama ita succeed. Lakini nilipofika nilikuta wamenigojea. Kila siku kwangu watu walikuwa wanakuja ili tunashare, wananiuliza venye ilienda, ninawajibu. Walikuwa wanakuja kama wiki mbili, hawakuwa wanakosa watu nyumbani. Kwa hivyo sasa nikawapa story na wakafurahia sana, na wakaona kweli yote yanawezekana. Hadi sasa watu wote wanaamini kweli kuna jambo kama hilo huwa linafanyika. Mimi huwa nafanya kazi zangu kawaida, hata naona kweli hata niko na nguvu zaidi. Kwa hivyo hata ninafanya zaidi kuliko venye nilikuwa nafanya mbeleni. Kwa hivyo hakuna jambo lenye linitatiza kutoka nifanyiwe kutoka nipatiane kidney. Kwa hivyo yote yanaendelea sawa. Kwa sababu hata maji huwa nakunywa sana, juu nilikuwa nimezoea kukunywa. Kwa hivyo hata hiyo pia inanisaidia kwa mwili wangu. Nasikia tu mwili ukiwa strong na nikiwa na afya njema.
After 2 months of residency in Eldoret, where I was doing weekly clinics, the doctor felt my prognosis or recovery was also coming along very fine, such that towards the end of my 2nd month after transplant, I had a pending trip to travel to Germany and stay there for a month that is related to my research work back at my workplace at the university. So when I asked the physician, Dr. Koech, and the surgeon, Dr. Vijay, they reviewed my file, examined me physically, and they were of the opinion I should be good to travel. There is no problem. The only thing was I had to make sure I have my mask on, even in the course of my flight. And considering it's a flight for quite a number of hours, and having come from a major surgery 2 months before, then I had to get pressure stockings. And so that was the only addition. So I put on my pressure stockings on the legs, and it's meant to prevent any likelihood of formation of blood clots, since you'll be seated and you only wake up in the plane to go maybe for a long call or a short call and come back and sit. And the trip went on successfully. I was able to travel within November of 2019, stayed in Germany for a whole month, and came back at the end of November. And from there now, that's when I felt, I think my life is gonna be okay and things are working out well, because back in Germany I was able to attend meetings and sit down for a couple of hours and work, and that had been my fear, that I might lose that capability. So when I came back, I was preparing to resume work within January, back to teaching at the university. But then within January, that is when COVID issues started arising around the world. And of course, reading about it then would create fear sometimes, because even before the first cases arrived in Kenya around March, already we were quite informed about the situation through watching on TV or reading online. And considering I'm on anti-rejection therapy, which is basically immune suppressant medication for life, then there was a fear, knowing I'm vulnerable, what will be the consequences in case COVID arrives in Kenya and maybe you contract COVID. So I really kept in touch with my physician nephrologist, Dr. Koech, who is a very accessible person, and he's so nice. We communicate through WhatsApp, through phone calls or SMSs, even on days that I'm not going for my clinic visits. And so initially he was like, we also don't know, let's keep checking on whatever evidence is emerging. And so among the initial evidence started coming from Italian studies among transplant patients, and that is then when with time we realized the risk is not as high, but of course we are vulnerable, so we have to be careful. And so that is how then I was able to live through the COVID period, especially the 2019 season, though a bit stressed up because of the fear of not wanting to contract COVID, but at the same time living also with life as a kidney recipient. And life post-transplant is exciting, and of course you are reinvigorated because your body stature is back. I had lost a lot of weight. Now I'm back. I'm even trying to watch my weight. Currently, I'm trying as much as possible to be on a weight reduction kind of diet, do a lot of exercises, because I've gained a bit of weight I would consider a bit extra. But all this is because then my body is back to its old shape before my sickness. And the only challenge post-transplant is the cost of the anti-rejection drugs, because the drugs, of course, are imported. For Kenya, for most of us who can then afford to take the drugs, then we rely on generics from India, which are equally expensive by our standards. So on average, you find within the first year post-transplant, you are spending between 30 and 40,000 shillings per month on the drugs only. And that is for the generics. Of course, the originals are, I think, around 3 times that you'd require around 120 to 150,000 shillings per month. And that is quite a burden. And one of the biggest issues we've had with the policy landscape within Kenya is healthcare, social medicine support is there. NHIF supports you when you are on dialysis. Actually, the entire cost of dialysis, once you are an NHIF member, is covered. And then around the time you are going for transplant, they cover a certain proportion of your transplant costs. But then after that, NHIF disappears off the radar, so you are on your own. And it's one of the issues that we've been trying to fight very hard. Last year, through our support group, we were able to lobby through the health committee at the Senate, and we had a petition that we presented, and it went through presentation in plenary at the Senate, and it received very positive comments from the senators. And after it was accepted, then it was taken to the next level, which is the committee stage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like to support this petition. And Mr. Speaker, as a country, we need to re-examine ourselves regarding healthcare. Mr. Speaker, even before we come to this kind of complicated case of kidney transplant and the effects thereafter, Mr. Speaker, in this country today, each of us knows when you go to the hospital the kind of bill you are faced with. And Mr. Speaker, most of our ordinary people just cannot afford. But the truth of the matter is that the most important thing to any human being, the most important thing that a government can give service to its people is to start with affordability for somebody to survive. Food. After that, health care comes second. Roads and all these other things can come another category. But, Mr. Speaker, I dare say that in this country today, most common people cannot afford health care. And to those who have gone through transplant, it's just a nightmare. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support this petition, and I ask that this matter be looked in a wholesome manner.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to actually support this important petition that affects millions and millions of Kenyans. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that universal health care is important, and there are Kenyans who have chronic diseases. There are Kenyans who, suffer from blood pressure. There are some Kenyans also who need dialysis on a weekly basis. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that so many families are suffering out there, because sometimes you'll find that the head of the family is supposed to actually look for money for dialysis, and he is not covered. So there's need to ensure that the NHIF covers, dialysis patients, so that these families are cushioned. So there's need for this petition to be taken to the right of the committee, and there's need for the committee to ensure that it expedites, that it ensures that it is covering Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, it is our honor to ensure that we are supporting the common man out there. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. I support this petition.
Immune suppressant drugs due to financial issues or any other reason, the transplanted kidney is rejected in the body and they either die or start the process of transplant once again. 6, that many patients opt to stay at dialysis stage than go get transplanted because NHIF does not support post-transplant medication, which ranges from 40,000 to 60,000 per month, Mr. Speaker. 7, that NHIF provides post-transplant cover to patients who have a comprehensive medical cover for civil servants, leaving out a huge number of Kenyans from this program. 8, that we have made the best effort to have these matters addressed by the relevant authorities, of which they have failed to give a satisfactory response. 9, that none of these issues raised in this petition is pending in any court of law, constitutional or any other legal body. Therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the Senate investigates this matter and 1, initiates price subsidy for post-transplant medicine in a more affordable way. 2, intervenes in the provision of post-transplant drugs under NHIF cover. And 3, intervenes for the groups to obtain a proper cover that is not to be determined by job group. Your petitioners humbly pray.
Mr. Speaker, Article 43, of course, is very clear to everybody that every person has a right to the highest standards of healthcare, and therefore, especially people that need it the most, people that have had post-operative care, people that are dealing with things such as kidney failures are the most needy, and therefore insurance ideally should be coming in at our hour of need. And in this case, Mr. Speaker, to be told that they don't get any post-operative or post-care is really sad, and I hope that this House will do justice in the implementation of Article 43, in the support of the Big Four agenda as far as the universal health coverage is concerned, and actually in ensuring that our people are covered and our people get dignity even in sickness.
And so we are hoping the Health Committee of Senate can expedite our petition, and in our petition what we are petitioning for is for the national government to make it possible for us to afford those drugs, either through NHIF, since we are now into universal healthcare. Why should we be buying very expensive drugs? I'm now 1.5 years post-transplant, and I know within the season around which I was transplanted, so far 3 of the kidney recipients have lost their transplant grafts because they couldn't afford the drugs at some point. And so what they did, some of them either started rationing their intake of medication contrary to the recommendations of the doctor. And what happens is, once the immune system is up because you are not taking the right dosage, then your immune system knocks off the new kidney. And that is sad and quite disheartening, considering they have now to go back to the life of dialysis. And most of them are young, within their working years, and so doing dialysis twice a week, and some of them react to dialysis sessions where they come out very weak. Others even end up getting into, like, they faint. Others then start developing bone problems. Other challenges come with dialysis, and so it becomes challenging for somebody who is working. So their productivity is lowered in a way. So what we are petitioning is, if the government can make sure the drugs are not only available in the country, just the same way they did with the HIV patients, where the ARV drugs were made available, they were made very cheap, and that then prolonged the lifespan of HIV positive patients. So what we are saying is, we have a big population now, because transplants are done within several hospitals in Nairobi, including Kenyatta, Mpisha, Aga Khan, and others, in Eldoret, Moi Teaching Referral Hospital, St. Luke's, and Medihill. And so we have a big population of transplant recipients now, and majority are in their young, productive age. If you go into our Telegram group, you'll find close to 200 members. WhatsApp group, we are approaching 100. And those are just people who've been transplanted more recently, and we are aware of their presence. But there are also others who are out there and they are not in any support groups. So what we are saying is, if the drugs can be made affordable and available, even through NHIF cover, then that would really help us go a long way in terms of protecting the precious gift that we've received from our donors, while also increasing or continuing with our productivity in nation building and prolonging our lives, of course, because transplants work. Evidence shows that. I think when you go to YouTube, I know of a kidney recipient from the US who is now celebrating 55 years, him and the sister who was the donor. And of course, in Kenya at the moment, I've been able to meet a couple of people in my support group. Some of them were transplanted 25 years ago at Kenyatta National Hospital, and they are still up and strong and leading a normal life. Like I said, after admission at War Memorial Hospital in Nakuru on a Monday, the same day I had walked myself into the health center at Egerton for a referral because I had this dry cough, and then the pressure being diagnosed as at 230/173 was a shocker in itself, because here I am, I had never been hospitalized before. The only time I can remember in my life having gone to hospital was during my undergraduate when I was in 3rd year, and I had a boil around the neck region. And when I kept pressing it, of course, then it worsened, kept digging in, and left a big hole. So when the pain persisted is when I went and was given, I think, 2 injections of a staggered week, and the tablets that I was given. So that's the only time I had ever been hospitalized. So here I am with very high blood pressure, and after the tests, by the 3rd day in hospital at War Memorial, I knew I had end-stage kidney disease. And even from the name itself, it's scary. End-stage is like, then your life has come to an end. And I was like, I still have many more years ahead. I still have a career ahead. And so the first feeling is, am I going to die? So I think I had taken it very positively within the first 3 or 4 days, until on the 4th day, I remember my elder sister coming together with her son, who is a student at Masai Mara University. And at first point, I told the nurse I don't want any visitors to come and see me, because I was really down on that day, and I think I was crying. So, of course, it took one of the nurses talking to me and trying to counsel me and tell me, no, there is hope. You even don't have complications. The diagnosis as shown here is it's end-stage kidney disease, but others come having many other comorbidities before they take in its kidney failure. They are already grappling with other health challenges. For you, you are walking and you are upright. You say on Friday you had a lecture, you were teaching at the university, so yours will go well, so take heart. So at that point is when I calmed down and agreed that my sister and the son and the husband then could come and see me. And so when they came in, of course, my eyes were bloodshot, very red, because I'd been crying alone in the room. And I could see even my brother-in-law, Mr. Kingori, seemed disturbed, because rarely do you see a fellow man looking so down, and he's been crying. He appears quite weak today. And even my nephew was, of course, looking at me and scared, and he was like, things must be very bad later when we got talking, as then I got into the dialysis and the transplant test. So sometimes he would come as my driver to take me up to Eldoret. So those are the times I would open up to him and tell him, on that day I was really down. That is when it hit me that my life could be coming to an end. And looking at my children, they are still young. I was like, no, I don't want to die and leave them young. So it's quite a disturbing moment, and a lot of support is needed. That's why I credit the support I got from my fellow faculty members, most of whom are very senior medical doctors, and even my friends and family and relatives. They really all stood by me, and that is what made me, after going through that first kind of grieving period in terms of might be losing my life, then thereafter life became bearable for me, because somebody would always either be calling me or is there physically with me, and I would see the concerns they had. We even had, I think we held 2 mass sessions, and the priest came both times here at home, and even the church groups, the entire members would come. And that really now made me again now start feeling like they are really going all the way for me. And being a selfless person, I think now that changed the fortunes for me. In fact, at one point during our many tests pre-transplant, I started worrying about my sister, because I'm like, she's going through so much. Because every time we go, they'll be drawing blood, and there'll be several bottles of the small tubes that they use to collect blood. So at some point, I'm like, she volunteered, and now I'm feeling like maybe she's now the one who is sick, because of all these blood being drawn from many tests that were being done. And knowing and talking to her, and her encourages me and telling me, no, I'm not in any pain, and I want you to get well. So that gave me then the motivation to look at things positively and tell myself I'll have to come out of it not only alive but very strong, to show them that their concern and support was not in vain. So I think to me that was my biggest driving force in terms of overcoming even the kind of depression that you see people slip into. For my family, like immediately after the transplant and the first 1 month, you are not allowed to have any interactions with other people, because the anti-rejection therapy is quite intense, because then the immune system has to be brought down to a certain level for them to be comfortable. Your immune system will not wake up and attack the new kidney. And so you are wearing a mask, you have to live in a sterile apartment, and you avoid any interactions with outsiders. And so it became an issue, because my children are in Nakuru, my wife is in Nakuru, and we couldn't see each other. So we could only communicate by phone every other day in the evening, and I would listen to my children over the phone. My daughter would recite poems over the phone for me and write for me letters that then my wife would photograph and send me through WhatsApp. So of course that physical separation takes a toll on you. And so when they came to see me, I think it was after 2 months, it was really moving for me, seeing they're here and they are with me. And I think after that, my life then took a different turn, because I realized So life can be short sometimes. The things sometimes we took for granted. So I find myself, I tell my friends nowadays, I'm more of a home daddy. So I'm rarely away from home. If I'm at work, then I'll do my work and come home. So I want to have my kids around and my wife around, because it's like I've gone through a phase where I felt I could have lost them by the illness that I had. So it has changed my life, even in terms of the amount of time I spend with them. I think I spend the most time with them nowadays than I used to previously, either because I want to be with friends sometimes, or my work would take me all over the place. So nowadays is when I can say I really feel the value of family. The lockdown, to me, I think I had already started adapting to that life, because even after coming back from Germany, before attempting to resume work, before the lockdowns came in, I was spending most of my time at home with the family. So when the lockdown came, to me, it was like it's even better, because now we are at home with them. So I have a lot of time trying, even developing a lot of interest in their learning, so that even by the time school started offering Zoom learnings through e-learning, I was among the first volunteers in the school where they go to at Victor El Milimani to volunteer to train even their teachers on the use of ICT for learning. And I was in the committee that was then helping us roll out e-learning for the children. And so I would be happy in the morning to wake up with them, set up the laptops and have them do their e-learning classes. And so I would say I think I've been able to understand them better, know what their weaknesses, and even discuss their aspirations. And so even up to date, when my son comes back from school, he gives me a briefing on some of the ideas he has, because he wants to be an astronaut. So these are things that I feel it's the quality time that every parent should aspire for, in terms of the time we share with our children and getting to listen to their stories, and not them just listening to our stories every time. So it has made me maybe a better parent, I would say. I owe my life to you, Peris. Through your selfless efforts, you gave me a kidney. And of course, like I told you, I'll take good care of it. And not just for you, but for me also, because it gave me a new lease of life. And so every day when I wake up and I'm taking my anti-rejection drugs, of course, you come to mind, knowing that I'm doing this because my sister gave me a kidney, and I must take the anti-rejection drugs to protect the kidney, because it also gave me life. So besides us being brother and sister, coming from the same mother and father, but then I carry a piece of, or I carry one of your kidneys with me. So it's something very special. So whenever I talk to you over the phone, and even in my support group, sometimes, and that is something we've come to discuss even as recipients of kidneys, is that talking to your donor, sometimes you feel like she's talking even to her own kidney, and it's a special feeling. So thank you so much. I'll forever be indebted to you, Peris.
Welcome.
Yeah.
May you live many, many blessed years.
Thank you. Thank you. My dear wife, Mary Wanjiko Gashie, is that I love you, and I'm happy that through the hard part of the journey, from when I started dialysis, and of course the diagnosis that seemed to also upset me, and of course my kidney failure was as a result of hypertension. And in hypertension, sometimes unknowingly, when your blood pressure is high, you become very temperamental. And so I realized, or I learned about those much later, and so sometimes I feel like maybe there are times I was too hard on you. So take heart and understand, and I love you so much. To my son John Mbugua, of course, I love you so much, and nothing gives me joy more than sitting down with you and you telling me the stories about the space shuttle that you're building with your team at school of your fellow class 6 students, and of course sitting down and you sharing me your stories in terms of how much you understand astronomy nowadays and deep science. So I look forward to being there into old age and seeing your dreams come true. To my daughter Jedida, who wants to be a doctor and is also very keen on so many things. So like she's the I'll call her the Renaissance woman. So like she's the one who wants to be good in everything. I'm happy about you. From when you used to recite to me poems around the time I was sick, even when visitors came, you are always ready to entertain them, up to now. And my happiness is seeing you growing up into a strong, healthy young woman. And my prayer is I'll be there for you, and I'll be there to see you attain your dreams.
Bwana yangu Charles Mbugua, ningependa kukushukuru sana kwa kuwa uliweza kunishikilia sana wakati nilikuwa nasaidia my brother. Kwa hivyo nakushukuru. Mungu Mwenyezi akubariki na akuzidishie na wema wake. Pia ningependa kumshukuru Stanislas Dhuo ambaye ndiye firstborn wangu. Mungu Mwenyezi akaweza kumbariki kwa yote aliyotusupport nayo, aliweza kunishikilia na tukaweza kusaidia anko yake. Mungu ambariki. Pia ningependa kupitisha ujumbe wangu kwa John Kimotho Mbugua ambaye pia yeye aliweza kutushikilia na tukaweza kusaidia anko yake. Pia nashukuru na Mungu aweze kumbariki. Pia msichana wangu naye ni Consolata wa Mbugua ambaye yako Bahati Girls, pia ningependa kumshukuru na pia kumuombea Mungu ili maisha yake yakaweza kuendelea vyema na Mungu amtendee mema.
To donors and of course to kidney recipients. Today, of course, I'm a year and a half post-transplant. I won't say it's a very easy journey. It takes a strong willpower and even being in support groups where you can share. But when you don't have anyone to talk to, it can be challenging. So subscribe to support groups and be there and be willing to share. And also follow the doctors, the nephrologists' advice always. Read a lot. Watch even YouTube videos on post-transplant life and the do's and don'ts, because not adhering to medication or mixing up medication is one of the big challenges that eventually then leads to failure. To kidney donors, one of the biggest challenges is how they relate with the people they donate the kidneys to. I'm happy to have a very loving sister here who has never demanded of anything from me or put any pressure on me. But I know of other friends whom we are in support groups with who have faced a lot of pressures. Some of them, their siblings who donated kidneys to them demand for money. Others, they demand for favors because they gave them life. And even others, some of their donors are even their own parents, and they feel the pressure. So if you donate with a good heart, and always know you saved your sibling's life or your brother's life or your sister's life, and do not put undue pressure on them in terms of maybe the things you want them to do for you. It should be out of a clean heart, and that way then our coexistence will be good and God will bless all of us.